All right, let's dive into a really powerful story about loyalty, power, and a surprising act of grace that comes from an ancient text. It all starts when a king, who's basically on top of the world, decides to look into his past, and it ends up making you rethink what power and kindness are all about. Let's get into it. Everything kicks off with this single question from King David, and it's a question that is absolutely loaded with history. See, he's looking for a survivor from the family of his old enemy, King Saul. But here's the kicker. It's all about the why. You see that last part? For Jonathan's sake? Yeah, that little phrase, it's the key to this whole thing.
So this is where our story really begins. We have a powerful king starting a very, very unusual search, all because of a promise he made a long, long time ago.
Okay, so you got to understand the world this is happening in. Back then, when a new king took over, the playbook was pretty simple and pretty brutal. You eliminate anyone from the old royal family who might challenge you. So for David to be actively asking around for one of Saul's heirs, well, you can imagine what everyone's thinking. They're assuming he's just cleaning house, right? Tying up loose ends?
But that's not what's happening here at all. David's not thinking about political strategy. He's driven by something the text calls covenant kindness. Now, this isn't just, random charity. This is a loyalty that's rooted in a super serious, binding promise he made years ago to his best friend Jonathan, who happened to be Saul's son. They basically swore to look out for each other's families, come what may. And even with Jonathan gone for years, David remembers. He hasn't forgotten that promise.
Okay, so the search is on. The king's men are basically looking for a ghost, a forgotten name from a family that had lost everything. And what they dig up? Wow, nobody saw this coming.
So they get a lead. It comes from this guy named Ziba, who used to be a servant in King Saul's household. He's the one guy who might actually know if any of Saul's family survived. You can just imagine the tension when he gets called to stand before King David. Like, what is this guy about to say?
And then Ziba drops the first bombshell. Yes, an heir is out there. Jonathan, David's dear friend, has a son who's still alive. Just think about that for a second. That alone is a huge deal. A direct descendant of both Saul and Jonathan is still out there, somewhere.
But wait, there's more. Ziba adds another crucial piece of information. This son is disabled. He's lame in both feet. In that culture, where physical strength was everything, especially for royalty, this immediately paints a picture of someone who's, completely vulnerable. This heir is no threat to David's throne. He's completely at the king's mercy. And the last piece of the puzzle is where he is, a place called Lo Debar, a name that literally means something like no pasture or nothingness. It's a barren, forgotten town out on the edge of the kingdom. So let's just piece this together for a second. Jonathan's son is alive, yes, but he's a disabled man living in the middle of nowhere, totally cut off from everything he should have inherited.
So what does David do? He immediately sends for him. And this sets up the big moment, the climax of the story. The forgotten heir is about to meet the very king who sits on his grandfather's throne.
I mean, look at the contrast here. It's just staggering. On one side, you've got King David in Jerusalem, the undisputed ruler at the peak of his power. And on the other, you have Mephibosheth, Jonathan's son, who's been pulled out of hiding and is probably thinking, this is it, I'm done for. The power imbalance is just off the charts.
So Mephibosheth gets dragged before the king, right? And you have to remember, he has no idea about this promise David made to his dad. All he knows is the man who defeated his family is now in charge. So he does the only thing he can think of. He falls on his face, totally submitting, expecting the absolute worst.
And his response when David speaks to him, man, it's just heartbreaking. He calls himself a dead dog. And in that culture, that was the absolute lowest thing you could call yourself. It meant you were worthless, insignificant, disgusting. This just shows you how low he feels. He sees himself as having zero value, none.
But David is about to flip the script entirely, not with a sword, but with an act of just radical grace.
So David's response unfolds in 3 amazing steps. First, he deals with the fear. He just says, don't be afraid. Simple, direct. Then he tackles the poverty. He gives him back all of his grandfather Saul's land, making him a wealthy man in an instant. And finally, the biggest one, he deals with the shame and isolation by giving him the highest honor possible, a permanent seat at the king's own dinner table.
I mean, talk about a complete 180. Mephibosheth isn't just forgiven, he's lifted up. This isn't just a handout. David is giving him back his dignity, a place where he belongs. The text even says he was treated like one of the king's sons. It's incredible.
Let's just look at how massive this change really is. Mephibosheth goes from being an outcast in a place called nothingness to an honored guest in the capital city. His family land, which was taken away, is given back, and Ziba, the servant who gave him up, is now ordered to work for him. His whole world is turned upside down, but in the best way possible.
So what can we pull from all this? What's the big idea here? Well, for one, that a true promise, a real promise of loyalty, it doesn't just fade away with time. It can cross generations. Another huge one is that real power isn't just about dominating people. It can be used to lift them up, to restore their dignity. And maybe most importantly, a single act of kindness, of genuine grace, can literally rewrite a person's entire story.
And that kind of leaves us with one last thing to chew on. Think about it. David could have just sent him a check, right? Tucked him away with a nice pension in Lodabar. That's charity. But he didn't. He brought him into the palace, to his own table. That's honor. And it makes you ask yourself, in our own lives, where do we draw that line between just giving charity and truly giving someone honor?